For God, the enemy will not be far away.
You're the temple. You're it. So when they say that they're going to build a third temple, say, hey, it's already here, brother. It's already here. It's mobile. It's on the move. I mean, it's got legs. It's walking around. This temple's going all over the place. It's not stuck in Jerusalem. It's going to Jakarta. It's going to Hong Kong. It's going to Davos, Switzerland. It's going to Shanghai. It's going to Mexico City. This temple's on the move. We're the temple. We're it. We're the temple.
You never know there's a devil until you're seen.
If you want to finish the race, you want to cross the finish line, you want to hear the Lord say, well done, thou good and faithful servant. You're going to remain consistent. You're going to adhere to sound doctrine. You're not going to chase every fad.
Run from ungodly, spasmodic movements and endless, empty prophecies.
This is TruNews. I'm Rick Wiles. Dead men don't tell tales, but the surveillance listening devices and software can reveal many tales. That may be the case regarding the bizarre butchering of Jamal Khashoggi inside the Saudi embassy in Turkey. There is an explosive new report circulating on the streets of Washington, spurred by a political gossip column of the U.S. edition of the UK news magazine, The Spectator. The rumor links Jared Kushner to the Khashoggi murder mystery. Edward Zoll and Doc Burkhart have been looking into this rumor today.
So is this story back from the dead now?
It's back from the dead. It's Halloween. Halloween was last week, so here we are once again talking about Jamal Khashoggi's gruesome butchering, where they used a bone saw while he was still alive, inside the Saudi embassy in Turkey. Now, that happened, October 2018. And what's happening now, Doc, is that things that the three of us speculated, going, I would say, back to the spring of 2017, involving the unusual relationship between Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of President Trump. We speculated that there may be a sharing of U.S. intelligence between Jared Kushner, who had a security clearance that was taken away for a while, and we were speculating back in the spring of 2017 that Kushner may have been sharing U.S. intelligence with his buddy, Mohammed bin Salman, giving him information about who his internal enemies were in Saudi Arabia, because shortly at that time there was the roundup of the rich, powerful Saudis, where they strung them up by their feet, hung them
Ritz-Carlton
in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Riyadh.
If you're going to be strung up, that's the best place.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be tied up, let it be done in the Ritz. But it was a bizarre story. So you had the roundup in 2017,
yes,
and then you had the Khashoggi murder in 2018, and for us, what we saw, the connection was Israel and Zionism.
Right.
So what we speculated back in 2017 was that Jared Kushner, being an agent for a foreign power, his close family friend is Netanyahu, who
slept in his bed.
I hope without him there.
Yes,
but
when he was a kid.
When visiting, but when Netanyahu would visit the United States, he would stay with the Kushners.
Right.
That's how close these people are. So we were speculating that Jared Kushner was acting as an agent for Israel, He had access to classified American intelligence, and he was sharing that intelligence with Mohammed bin Salman for two reasons. One, to move Saudi Arabia in the direction that Israel wants Saudi Arabia to go, namely to cut the legs out from under the Palestinians, because Kushner was running the so-called peace plan, the deal of the century.
Right.
So if he could get Saudi Arabia to sell out the Palestinians,
or
betray them,
or at least not protest, even if that far. And so
I think he wanted an all-out betrayal. I think he wanted them to betray the Palestinians, and then second, business funding.
right.
If he could get his paws into some Saudi money for his business deals, and those business deals included building settlements in the West Bank.
Through the Kushner companies.
That's right. So if he could convince the Saudis, hey, there's a lot of money to be made. If we get this peace deal together, there's a lot of money to be made. So that's what I think was going on. So now, we haven't talked about it very much, but now we've got this, it's a rumor, political rumor, that came out Sunday night in The Spectator, that the House Intelligence Committee is looking into this. See, there are people watching TruNews that would never give us any credit for anything, but they do watch because they know that we're informed. Not only do we have our facts, but we have insight. And our insight often turns out to be correct. And what some people criticize us for speculating, it turns out 6 months, a year later, our speculation was dead on. And I think we were right with Kushner. I've always said that if anything happens to Donald Trump politically, it will come through Jared Kushner. The Russia collusion story was a hoax. The Ukrainian story is
Just a lot of hot air.
Hot air. I mean, the person who should be investigated is Joe Biden. And so for both of those, the Russia hoax and the Ukrainian, I won't give it any credibility at all. But when you start talking about Kushner, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, yes, there's something there. And if the Democrats go there, Donald Trump is in trouble. The question is, do they have the courage to go there, because they have to take on Israel and Saudi Arabia?
Right. I've always felt the greatest vulnerability that President Donald Trump has been his son-in-law from the very beginning. When we first started talking about him being granted top secret clearance, remember the phone story? Remember when there was supposed to be a picture taken from the Oval Office? Mm-hmm. It was a picture of the ceiling of the Oval Office, right, that was supposedly attributed to Jared Kushner's phone. And then stories like this along the way where, there was a push to get his top secret clearance pushed through so he could operate within the White House.
Well, it was
According to stories, he was denied.
He was denied, and then President Trump actually ultimately intervened last year to get the clearance through. I believe of this year, it was reinstated, not at the top level, but he has a top secret clearance once again. But it was only after the intervention of President Trump. It was his chief of staff, actually, John Kelly, reported that was blocking Jared Kushner and his wife and other advisors he deemed
that would go back to
the office.
That would go back to 2017, that there was a pushback inside the National Security Council that Kushner would not be granted security clearance. Then, according to the stories, President Trump intervened, ordered the National Security Council to give the clearance to Kushner. Then it was taken away. So he had it for about a year. Then it was suspended, but then he got it back. So the question is, why was it suspended? I think it's because people saw this kind of behavior going on. Let's go back to the Khashoggi story. The Spectator magazine, it's the Cockburn gossip column, and the magazine reported that Kushner gave permission to Mohammed bin Salman to arrest Jamal Khashoggi before he was killed and chopped up. So if this is true, Edward, I mean, this is implicating the president's son-in-law in a murder.
Yes, because Jamal Khashoggi, a U.S. citizen, would have been killed in cold blood in this case. It's akin to ordering a drone strike on an American, let's say arguably on U.S. soil. Coburn, the columnist, I believe it's an Irish-Scottish last name, so they drop off the CK. What he alleged here is that there are 7 whistleblowers total. And one of the whistleblowers has nothing to do with Ukraine, but specifically has something to do with a phone call between Jared Kushner and Mohammed bin Salman. Now, Coburn claims that the contents of this call was not just simply, let's say, a green light being given to Mohammed bin Salman. More so, many secrets were discussed between Jared Kushner and Mohammed bin Salman. And what the whistleblower has alleged, according to Coburn, is that Jared Kushner would request secrets. When you're dealing with government databases and you're looking at classified information, there's a fingerprint when you try to request some information. It just, as it turned out, things that Jared Kushner was querying, it was searching on the classified databases, would somehow show up in the phone calls of Saudi royal family members between each other. Now, this is according to intercepts that a CIA official looked at, according to Coburn's source. Now, according to this is the most, I'd say, damning part of the accusation, is that President Trump's decision to remove troops from northern Syria. Now, we've spoken about this. It could have been 28. It could have been a couple thousand if they're keeping it secret. But let's say it was just the troops. The decision to remove them, according to Coburn, was incentivized, if not pushed through, by President Erdogan blackmailing President Trump because the Turks had allegedly got their hands on a transcript of one of these calls between Jared Kushner and Mohammed bin Salman.
Now, that would make a lot of sense based upon the scenario of events that's taken place since the UN coverage that we participated in, how it was that Turkey was able to make this, I mean, they were bold about it. This is what we're going to do. We're going to have a 30-mile barrier along Syria. We're going to do this. And no one flipped their lid over that at the UN. No one gave it a second beat on the drum. And for the U.S. to allow it.
When you and Edward were at the UN meeting, refresh my memory, did President Erdogan meet privately with President Trump?
I don't believe he met privately with the president. I don't think he had a one-on-one with him, but he did meet with Lindsey Graham. Remember this, because there was an event right before the UN General Assembly at the hotel we were actually staying at, and President Erdogan held this kind of like a nationalist, kind of pro-Turkey rally with other donors and prominent Sunni Muslims in the United States in New York. And on the sidelines of this meeting, he met with a bunch of foreign officials, including Lindsey Graham. I believe there was supposed to be a meeting between President Trump and President Erdogan. They did have a phone call. From my memory, they had a phone call with each other. And President Erdogan actually did make it very clear that he, during his speech, but also a statement he put out at the UN General Assembly, that upon leaving New York, once he gets back to Turkey, within 72 hours, they will begin an invasion of Syria. And he made that clear to the world at large.
From the time of the Khashoggi murder, and by the way, I want to go back. I want to clarify. Personally, I don't believe that Jared Kushner ordered the murder of Khashoggi.
Now, no, but he could have provided intelligence on where he was going to be.
Yes, and he may have said, go ahead and have him arrested, not knowing, not realizing
that arrest in Saudi might mean cutting them up into pieces and torturing them.
That the whole thing went horribly wrong in Kushner's eyes, but not in bin Salman's eyes, that he did exactly what he wanted done. He wanted to get rid of Khashoggi. And I think probably when that happened, Kushner was terrified that he was implicated in this thing. Okay, so you saw the United States kind of circle the wagons around Saudi Arabia, and while others in the world were outraged, the U.S. was saying, let's think about this. Let's wait. Let's gather the facts.
Let's look at our strategic alliance.
But what was unusual about that period of time was that, the intelligence agencies, the administration, everybody, they circled the wagons. But did you notice there were outliers in the Senate and in the House of Representatives that were criticizing the death of Khashoggi? And some of those were Republican voices.
Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham was among
one of them.
And it always confused me on how the two, how those two things were happening at the same time, where you had, President Trump supporters within the Senate and the House, but you really saw, and they were critical of the Khashoggi event, but everyone else within the administration was going, well, we don't know all the details about it. We don't know all the information, or it's a Saudi matter, or, 1,000 different excuses. And they drug it out as long as they could. You say, well, yes, we do have some intelligence. And then when Turkey turned over the audio, they said, well, it's going to take us a while to analyze this. It took us about 2 hours to analyze it, but it took the CIA about 3-4 months to analyze it. And so,
well, that's the other thing, is that President Erdogan clearly, from the get-go, let the world know he had the goods on bin Salman. They were very open about it. And they didn't hide the fact that their spy agency spied on Saudi Arabia's embassy.
That's right, because they bugged the embassy.
That's how they got the embassy. We have recordings of they actually had recordings of the murder.
Yes.
Which means that they had listening devices in the walls of the embassy.
Right.
So President Erdogan wasn't coy. He was very open and said, we have the evidence. Khashoggi was not only murdered, he was chopped up into pieces. And, they kept threatening to release more and trying to get the United States to do something, and the U.S. didn't do anything. Well, it may be because it wasn't so much we were protecting the petrodollar as much as we were protecting Jared Kushner.
The son-in-law.
Yes.
All right? So, what we have to find out now is, did President Erdogan, either at the UN directly or through diplomatic couriers, did he get a message to Donald Trump that said, withdraw from northern Syria or I release the information about Jared Kushner? That's what I think happened.
And based on the events of everything we've seen over the past 4 weeks, that fits the scenario there. And so
if that happened, and if investigators prove that it happened, Donald Trump is finished.
Yeah, this is more
real
damaging.
Collusion. It's
this
real
is
collusion.
more damaging than Ukraine.
It's not collusion. I don't think it's collusion, Edward,
Coercion?
in the sense, because collusion to me is, hey, you and I are going to get together and we're going to secretly come up with a deal that's against the best interests of...
Implies complicity, essentially. This would be more
blackmail.
coercion.
Yeah.
Blackmail. It's blackmail. It would mean that the President of the United States was blackmailed. All right. But he wouldn't be the first one, because Bill Clinton, others have had compromised dealings with members of the opposite sex and so forth, and countries have used it against them. But in this case, if investigators can show that another head of state was able to blackmail the President of the United States involving the President's son-in-law,
Yes.
and that the President of the United States made a change in U.S. military and foreign policy based on a blackmail threat
For a family member.
for a family member whom he insisted be in the White House and be given
Top secret
top-secret intelligence clearing, then, Doc, he deserves whatever he gets, if this turns out to be true.
Right.
Well, something that brings credence to this claim in The Spectator is that, remember the odd foreign trip by Nancy Pelosi, Jerry Nadler, and Adam Schiff, right? Well, they met
to Jordan, and didn't they went to Saudi Arabia?
I believe.
What was the second country?
Afghanistan. Afghanistan was secret. So Jordan and Afghanistan. Why I bring that up is, in Nancy Pelosi's public statement about the trip, she claimed the delegation, which again included the House Intelligence Committee chairman, the House Oversight chairman, and the Speaker of the House, they met with the attaché chief, the person in charge of the U.S. Embassy and the affairs there in Jordan. Well, just so happens we were looking up her name. She actually worked at the Tel Aviv/Jerusalem embassy. She was basically in charge of all U.S. embassy affairs in Jerusalem prior to taking that position. Adam Schiff, who Coburn is claiming is looking into this right now, Adam Schiff met with a person who may have specific information related to quid pro quo, coercion, potential blackmail, even intercepted cables, because often the embassies are used as relay stations for these types of calls. It's possible that's what that meeting was about, because at a minimum, they met with an official who might have been privy to that.
Yes. It's human nature to protect family members. That's why no executive head of state should ever appoint family members to government positions, because your emotions are involved.
Right.
When it's a family member involved, and another country is trying to blackmail you over your son-in-law, your daughter, or whatever, whoever it is in your family, your emotions are involved. You're making decisions with your heart, not your head. Right? So I don't think Donald Trump would have done anything that would have been malicious if this story is true. I think it would have been motivated that I can't let this get out. This could send my son-in-law to prison. Okay, but the reverse side of this is you put him in that position. You gave him these. You insisted that he have security clearance. You did all these things, so now you take responsibility for it. Kushner and his wife, Jael, should never have been in the White House, ever, other than visitors.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And if the Ukraine is a toothless dog story, which it feels like it is, I mean, they keep trying to bite the president with it, then this story with Jared Kushner is a Rottweiler. I mean, it can bite and bite hard. And we've seen it since the appointment of Mr. Kushner all through this time. We've been trying to bring this, out to people and say to our audience and to viewers and listeners that, look, this is going to be a problem at some point for the president. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a problem for him, either with Yael or with Jared at some point, that there's going to be some sort of compromise that takes place. Because, like you said, it's human nature to protect family members. So it's going to be, I'm just wondering why now? Why is this coming out now? Because this is, to us, it's been obvious for 2 years, Rick. But why is this now happening?
Because the Ukraine story doesn't have enough legs to walk, but the attention to it, I think, is motivating other people inside the government who know things to step up. ABC, this Spectator article, plus I think ABC News, is reporting that there may be as many as 7 whistleblowers now, all reporting to the House Intelligence Committee personal knowledge of things that they heard on presidential phone calls.
Well, we know from the lawyer, Mark Zed, who represents the man we named on the program, Eric Ciaramella, the CIA whistleblower who reportedly left the White House in 2017, worked for both Biden and Mr. Brennan, Obama's head of the CIA. He said, I'm talking Mr. Zed, the lawyer for this man, said he was representing a second whistleblower. So at a minimum, that attorney has at least another client. You have Mr. Vindman, who's already basically given testimony, and Tim Morrison, the NSC's director for European and Russian affairs. That's 4 at a minimum. Coburn here is claiming there's just 3 others. I think it's within the realm of possibility. It's definitely plausible more coming forward. And Rick, with each one of these, you have the potential of another article of impeachment. Let's say one article of impeachment related to a quid pro quo dealing related to military aid somehow being held off to benefit President Trump's campaign. That's just one article. If they can keep stacking these up by reviving the same stories which were being run in 2017 and 2018, now with some teeth behind it, because you're using an actual impeachment inquiry, you could see 6, 7 impeachment articles that are laid forth. All it takes is one, right? All it takes is one.
It takes one, yeah. But there'll be multiple charges.
You notice that we don't talk about Russia collusion anymore now, right? I mean, did they collude or not? I mean, for 2.5 years that the Russians colluded, right? That's all we heard about. But then that died. Now the Ukraine story, came up. And once again, just think it's full of hot air.
But Doc, if you ask most Democrats, they would say, yes, he did collude with the Russians.
Yeah,
because the propaganda got in their head.
Because they went through the brainwashing. But it's almost as I said, we'll try the Russian collusion thing, see if we can take them out there. All right, we've got a backup plan. We got Ukraine here. And then they finally say, at some point here in the very near future, and you see the first drip of this falsehood. All right, so those were the fake ones. Let's bring out the real deal. If those two won't work, let's bring out the one that will.
I think what prompted the Ukraine story, and I follow your line of thinking and agree with it, but I think what prompted the Ukraine story is that Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani were doing their own investigation in Ukraine, connecting the Bidens to Burisma Energy, payoffs, large transfers of funds to both Bidens, and then the mysterious server, that the DNC server could be in Kiev. So that really heightens, the mystery around what was going on. What was really behind the Russia hoax story? Was it that the world may find out that the DNC and the Clintons were running a foreign operation during the campaign, that they put their servers in a foreign country to be outside the reach of the law here? Because the FBI has never seen, they've never even attempted to see the DNC servers. That's because they're in another country. But anyhow, I think what was happening is that Giuliani and Trump were on the trail, which scared the daylights out of some deep state guys that were running the operation, and they realized
we need to divert. We need to get attention elsewhere.
Well, the smartest thing to do is accuse your opponent
of what you're doing.
What you're doing, all right? And so they started accusing Trump of the very things that they had been doing in Ukraine. And they flipped the story around, and nobody's talking about the Bidens.
No.
And the $900,000 that Burisma transferred to Joe Biden when he was vice president of the United States. Nobody's talking about any of this stuff, really, other than, President Trump at rallies. But the general population really doesn't get it. But I think the people who were running the Ukrainian operation in 2016 are terrified that he is on the trail, that he's going to lay out the evidence. And so they started this movement right away, which means they brought one of their guys who I think they had planned it all along inside,
like a sleeper cell.
Inside the White House. And they said, hey, we need you to file a report right now, whistleblower report. This is life and death. But now I think you have others who are genuinely coming out and saying, well, let me tell you what I heard. And this stuff about Kushner is radioactive. If this stuff is true, it's radioactive, and Donald Trump will not have a way out. We've said here on this program since 2017, if Donald Trump gets in trouble, it will be because of Jared Kushner. And I'm convinced of it. Let's go back, revisit some of the stories. Daily Mail, 2018, April 2018. Saudi Crown Prince bragged Jared Kushner gave him CIA intelligence about other Saudis, saying, here are your enemies, days before corruption crackdown, which led to torture and death. That was 2018.
Right.
And I believe at the time what we were saying about this story was it appeared, because the way the timeline worked for the crackdown was that Jared Kushner had just visited Riyadh. He was leaving Riyadh about that week or the week before, and then the crackdown occurred, the crackdown involving top-level Saudi royal family, even billionaires. Prince Faisal, the man who owned part of Twitter, was reportedly part of this roundup. But this occurred right after Jared Kushner left, and we said Jared Kushner must have hand-carried a dossier, a classified dossier to the Saudis. But then now we read a story in 2018 from the Daily Mail they appear to have heard very similar from their own sourcing that that's exactly what took place.
And I'm going to maintain that Kushner was doing it for the benefit of Israel, the advancement of Zionism, and the advancement of his business interests.
But wait, there's more, Rick, because, Jared Kushner just didn't, visit, have a, 30 minutes over coffee conversation with Mohammed bin Salman. He stayed over several times.
Through the night.
And so, they're having sleepovers. They're having, late talks deep into the night. Back then we asked, okay, so what's the relationship? What's a nice Jewish boy hanging out with, the Prince of Saudi Arabia? All right, that's an honest question,
the
right?
Sunni Muslim prince, the Wahhabist prince.
So, listen, Mohammed bin Salman knew what was going on. There was no, if there was any quid pro quo, yeah, let's talk about that. Mohammed bin Salman knew that he was getting something out of the relationship too. Maybe it was, intelligence service from Israel. Maybe it was,
How about surveillance software to spy on your enemies?
So it was a two-way street here. There was no coercion, no, anything like that. There was, but the relationship was more than just a business. They were friends, or at least they act friendly to each other enough to have sleepovers, pajama parties. I mean,
well, the Daily Mail in April 2018. That's a year after we said it.
Right.
Because we said it in the in the spring of 2017. And Daily Mail was saying it a year later. They said Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman bragged of receiving classified U.S. intelligence from Jared Kushner and using it as part of a purge of corrupt princes and businessmen. Sources have told the Daily Mail that the prince, known as MBS, has been boasting about his close relationship with the president's son-in-law and senior advisor, and the intelligence which he told his circle Kushner passed to him. The Daily Mail quoted a source in Washington who said, Jarrett took a list out of names from the U.S. eavesdrops of people who were supposedly MBS's enemies. He took a list out of these people who had been trashing MBS in phone calls and said, these are the ones who are your enemies. That story is almost word for word what we speculated a year before when the roundup was taking place. We said Kushner is selling. He's not. Well, he's trading.
Sold by that
he's
time.
Trading. He's trading U.S. secrets for Saudi promises to help Israel.
Yes.
And for that is treason. If it's proven. And Kushner should be in prison, just like his father went to prison. They had to put this guy in prison. I've always said Kushner is a crook. I don't trust him. And he will be the downfall of the Trump administration.
And remember that this relationship between Jared Kushner and Mohammed bin Salman began before the shift within the palace there in Riyadh took place. That before Mohammed bin Salman started consolidating his power. That friendship was in place long before all those events started taking place, where he moved up the ladder quickly.
Well, President Trump's first foreign trip was to Saudi Arabia. That was deemed as a huge win, essentially, for the Saudis, in addition to the launch of the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Alliance against Terrorism. Remember the glowing white globe? That happened during that trip that President Trump took. Now, in addition to what you've already mentioned, Rick, there's a certain act which is going to come back and hurt President Trump and his relations, his son-in-law and his daughter. It's the Presidential Records Act. This is something we spoke about extensively during 2015, 2016 in relation to Hillary Clinton, because this act prohibits any senior White House officials from using non-official email or messaging accounts. We're revisiting this all over again. It's been reported that, let's say, Jared Kushner has kept up his friendship with Mohammed bin Salman by using the WhatsApp app, Facebook's app on his cell phone. Well, guess what? You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to use any unofficial means, the same way Hillary Clinton wasn't allowed to use her BlackBerries to hide emails and send illicit messages.
And private email servers. And we know that Barack Obama had a private email address. Several members of the cabinet were using
monikers, kind of like anonymous names
so
of basketball players.
They were communicating, some of them using Gmail.
Right.
To talk about government business.
Why not? Gmail's just government mail anyway. So that's all it stands for.
That's true. But it's prohibited. It's illegal.
And there's a reason it's prohibited.
Yes. Because it's stupid. Nobody in their right mind in a position like that would be using unprotected, non-secure communication methods.
Unless you wanted it to be read.
And that's what we've speculated about
Hillary Clinton.
That's right. There was a report by Citizens for Ethics about some of Kushner's business dealings in Indonesia and China that are linking Kushner with the Saudis, getting funding,
right?
Because he was getting funding through SoftBank, which gets half of its investment money from Saudi Arabia.
Well, he was at least making the pitch to SoftBank because even as we were looking back, and this was back in 17 and 18, Jared Kushner is still making business deals in the West Bank, in Saudi Arabia, in China. He's, even though he's serving in the White House.
Well, he never divested himself, which is the biggest issue. He had shares in Kushner.
Neither did President Trump.
That's true.
That's the shocking thing. President Trump never put his business interests in a trust.
Nope.
He said he was going to.
He just stepped away. That's all he did.
But who did he hand it over to?
His sons.
And they're in the White House.
Yes.
Running around, and his daughter. So the whole Trump family is using the government as though it's an arm of the Trump business empire. I really think this is going to burn him really bad. It's the greed for money and the disdain for rules because he's always been able to do things his way. Mm-hmm. And you can't do it that way when you're the President of the United States. I just find it shocking that he never put his business in a trust while he's President of the United States. Technically, legally, he's still running the Trump organization.
And information he's learning or the meetings he's having with top-level officials, leaders of state of other countries, those could, in this, potentially influence the success of that private company, that private interest that he still holds. Well, with regard to Jared Kushner, you mentioned, there's this private firm. He actually owns part of Kushner Company still, and Kushner Company owns a subsidiary called Cadre. Now, this is run by his brother Josh Kushner. Well, that's one of the, let's say, intersections with the Saudis. This group, according to Business Insider, met with senior executives and senior, basically advisors with the SoftBank Vision Fund and received about $100 million of investment to basically finance their various projects around the world. This is Cadre is involved in a lot of construction investment. So that's one end of it. The other end is in relation to the Trump Towers in Indonesia. The Crew organization you're mentioning, they look through some of the interests in relation to President Trump and his family. Well, the Trump organization, reportedly using a Saudi construction firm, was in works to build a Trump Tower, a Trump-branded resort, rather, in Indonesia.
Was it the Bin Laden construction company?
I don't believe it's the Bin Laden construction company, but that wouldn't shock me.
But would it shock you?
Oh, well, the Bushes used it.
Yeah, it's actually one of the biggest construction companies in Saudi Arabia. So it's very possible that it was that construction, but I don't know if they were involved in this deal. But in addition to that, Jared Kushner has been the one who's sent on the investment, basically, initiatives to the Middle East that involve the Saudis, whether it be the Bahrain conference, the Peace and Prosperity conference Jared Kushner held a couple months ago, or
Davos in the desert.
Yeah, the
last
Future
week.
Investment Initiative that Jared Kushner attended.
Now, last year he didn't go because everything was still radioactive on the Khashoggi killing. But he was there last week. He was there with Steve Mnuchin, and he met with Mohammed bin Salman again. So I guess bygones are bygones. If Mohammed Salman did say that he had Kushner in his pocket, there's obviously no hard feelings about it, or maybe he's still in the pocket there.
Unless Turkey's decided they've waited long enough and they're going to play their cards. And we go back to where we started, did President Erdogan threaten Donald Trump that he would release recordings or transcripts of calls between Kushner and Mohammed bin Salman?
Well, the thing is, Turkey got everything they said they were going to get. All they wanted was a 30-mile strip along Syria. That's what they wanted.
They're still getting sanctioned, though. And you can see that the lira right now is taking a beating. President Erdogan's popularity in Turkey has definitely taken a plummet since the first introduction of sanctions. And they're still not getting their access to F-35s, which they paid money for. They're actually a partner in that military project. So in their eyes, it's a bunch of money that's been stolen from them.
I agree. Hey, what about Tom Barak?
So Tom Barak is an interesting fellow in this. He is reportedly a close friend of President Trump, and he's also a well-known investor. Reportedly has assets in the billions, if you look at some of his business holdings. But Tom Barak has come into the fray of this story because Tom Barak was pushing for a nuclear energy initiative in Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Now, the story actually, this is how George Nader, for example, is tied in to the Trump administration. Reportedly, George Nader and by proxy Eric Prince and a couple other figures who were involved early in the administration were helping people like Tom Barak to set up what was called as the Marshall Plan, the Middle East Marshall Plan. And even Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who at the time was CIA director, was involved in this initiative to bring civilian nuclear energy to Saudi Arabia.
Now, I think it's interesting they call this the Middle East Marshall Plan, okay? Because, first of all, what was the original Marshall Plan, Rick? It was the reconstruction of Europe after what?
World War II.
After World War II. So they had to break everything in order to be able to rebuild everything through the Marshall Plan.
That's the business model.
And so, it's a business model that works, right? So by them calling this the Middle East Marshall Plan, they have plans in place to knock everything down so they can rebuild it again.
They've been doing it for the past 18 years.
Yes. Now, Tom Barak also has another connection with the president in that he was on the inauguration committee for the president. You know, and there were some questions about, remember when they brought up questions about how the money was spent for the inauguration? And so Tom Barak was tied in with that as well.
I think he's Lebanese descent, isn't he?
That's true.
So he has connections to Lebanon.
And so there were questions about, all right, where did all this money for the inauguration come from? Did it come from foreign sources? You know, because they were looking into that. And so he's in a unique position here. He's, like Edward said, a longtime friend of the president. But once again, and also Barak in partnership with Rick Perry. Remember, Rick Perry brought this up about nuclear power for Saudi Arabia and how this the whole idea was being pushed. Of course, nuclear power for Iran, bad. Nuclear power for Saudi Arabia, good, right?
Well, the narration you're talking about here is that Rick Perry, again, the Secretary of Energy, he introduced a plan very similar to Tom Barak's plan to bring civilian nuclear power to Saudi Arabia, because that plan was stalling. There's a lot of questions of, well, Saudi Arabia right now, we're potentially may sanction them. We're looking into them over a potential murder of a U.S. citizen at this point. So can we really be moving ahead with some kind of energy, especially nuclear energy? So a civilian, say a government plan through Secretary of Energy, Rick Perry, was presented, and Jared Kushner reportedly worked on that plan with Rick Perry. But it is of note here, because you think about the Ukraine hoax story, the Ukraine accusations, that also involves Rick Perry and Jared Kushner.
And energy, yes.
And energy, because reportedly dating back to a June 4th, 2019 meeting between Rick Perry, Jared Kushner, and Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, the dinner they had, security and energy were brought up at that very meeting too.
Also, Jared Kushner has 4 large loans from Israel's biggest bank.
Bank Hapoalim, I believe is the pronunciation. Yes, and
it just happens to be it's under investigation
by the Department of Justice.
But if you're in the White House, you're one of the senior political advisor to the President of the United States, and you happen to be married to the President's daughter, and you're making 4 loan payments to a bank in a foreign country.
What's the worry? There's no worry with that, is there?
Doc, it is a grievous breach of ethics.
I agree.
It always has been. I've never been in favor of it. I've always warned that Jared Kushner is going to bring down Donald Trump. And I'm not going to cry a tear if Donald Trump ends up being removed because of Jared Kushner, I'm not going to cry a tear. Trumpers can get angry over it. I will defend President Trump against false accusations. Russia collusion is a false accusation. The Ukraine is a false accusation. But we get to Kushner.
Wow.
That's a real accusation, and I'm not going to defend him.
We never compromised this. We actually came out, I believe it was February 2017, when you sent me to cover CPAC. Remember the last day of CPAC, we condemned the inclusion of Jared Kushner and his wife, Jael, because of their liberal politics. Remember at the time the inclusion of same-sex marriage or LGBT language in, for example, the USMCA, these other agreements that the Kushners have been working on. We said this is not a good idea, Mr. President. We did not vote for you to come into office to bring Hillary Clinton's politics to the office.
So why haven't President Trump's political enemies really used this to this point?
Because it's Israel.
It was radioactive.
Doc, they will have to hate Trump so bad that they'll have to go against Israel to get him. And I think we may be there now because Benjamin Netanyahu is on his way out. And it looks like he's going to be indicted this month. So you can have Trump and Netanyahu, both. These are indictments. House impeachment is an indictment.
Right.
With Netanyahu to be the Attorney General of Israel. Both of them being indicted in the month of November. I think the Democrats and the pro-Israel Republicans that are not great friends of Trump, right, I think they're going to feel more at ease to go against Israel right now and put the blame on Netanyahu. It wasn't Israel, it was Netanyahu. Netanyahu's a crook.
He becomes the scapegoat.
Yeah, look at him, he's the crook. He was staying over at the Kushner's house. Kushner stayed at his house. They were buddies, all right?
They were working on a secret deal.
They were working on a secret deal. So we got rid of Netanyahu. We got General Gantz in, and now we got to get rid of Trump. I think that's how they're going to sell it. I really. But there's one more thing that we haven't brought up about Donald Trump and this murder. All right, Jamal Khashoggi, and when I saw one today. I forget which newspaper or which news site, one of the liberal news sites, that was reminding their readers that Jamal Khashoggi was an outspoken advocate of human rights and a fearless journalist. Oh, bull.
He was a CIA plant.
He worked with Al Qaeda. He worked with.
Train him in Afghanistan.
He was with bin Laden. He was a piece of crap. I mean, let's be honest. He was a thug. Okay, he wasn't a fearless reporter.
And even worse, he worked for Jeff Bezos. I mean, that's ultimate.
Yeah. So why do you think he's on the payroll of the Washington Post? Because he's an intelligence asset.
Yes.
But here's the point. Here's the piece of information that I got to remind you about. Jamal Khashoggi's uncle was Adnan Khashoggi. Adnan Khashoggi. And guess who he sold his luxurious yacht to? Donald J. Trump.
That's right.
What a small world. So when Donald J. Trump heard that there was a bloody murder that took place, that the Saudis had chopped up a guy in the embassy in Istanbul, and when they said his name's Khashoggi, he knew exactly who it was. It was Adnan's nephew.
And Adnan, being an infamous arms trafficker involved reportedly in the Iran-Contra affair, also, according to our investigations, had a relationship with Mr. Epstein and Robert Maxwell in the relation to sex trafficking.
Well, imagine, here we are now. We got Donald Trump, Epstein, Robert Maxwell, who's Ghislaine's father, deceased, who was tossed overboard from the Lady Ghislaine yacht, which meant the pledge.
Yes.
Her name means the pledge. This is like a James Bond movie.
And
not a very good movie.
My theory is he didn't just fall from the Lady Ghislaine. He was pushed in the water by the Lady Ghislaine.
His mom, his daughter.
Yes.
You think
I think that was maybe her assignment and her test. I don't know that. That's just speculation there.
Well, it'd make an interesting scene in a spy movie, but nobody has brought. We brought this out over a year ago. We brought out the Trump-Khashoggi connection a year ago, and nobody in the media has touched it. But I have a feeling, Doc, right now, the lefty journalists who watch us secretly to get information that
Run hit pieces, you know.
they hate us, they badmouth us, but they secretly watch us because they know that we're better reporters than they are. Okay, I have a feeling that somebody's going to do this expose. It's going to come out any day. The Khashoggi connection to Trump. Get ready for it. Just remember, it's true news. We told you a year ago about it. But I think you'll see one of the lefty websites report it. Huffington Post or somebody, Daily Beast, probably Daily Beast. All right, hey, Daily Beast, we're giving it to you here. All right, go, there it is. Take credit for it. Don't mention our name. Of course, you wouldn't mention our name.
Don't know how to spell it. So
yeah, they do. They know how to spell it.
In this whole situation with Jamal Khashoggi, I've seen a change that's taken place among evangelicals too on the matter, Rick, and that is, remember back when it happened, it was almost like, evangelicals didn't touch this, didn't mess with it at all.
No. There was a delegation that
I know. I'm getting to that. They had actually two separate delegations that actually, and on two different occasions, actually spoke to the Crown Prince about it, and they came away, not without a worry or care in the world about it. But then here, within the past month, we saw Pat Robertson. He condemned President Trump. Now, remember, a year earlier, Pat Robertson did not condemn President Trump. He said, no, Pat Robertson said it was just an internal matter. We don't need to worry about it.
He said 100 billion, was it a billion, 100 million? How many weapons did Saudi Arabia?
Oh, it was in the billions.
100 billion, is that what it was? Pat Robertson a year ago said, forget about Khashoggi. Investigating it is risking a $100 billion arms sale.
Right.
That's what Pat Robertson was concerned about.
But here, just a few weeks ago, we heard Pat Robertson say, after the Kurd situation exploded, in that statement, he condemned the president for not defending or seeking justice for Jamal Khashoggi.
Pat Robertson completely flipped because he got new talking points. He got a new set of talking points.
And the report of that arms deal was not able to be pushed through. Jared Kushner was the one that inked most of it. But the things that Jared Kushner promised the Saudis, just like the nuclear energy kind of program, the Marshall Plan, it was not approvable. The House and the Senate blocked it because it wasn't approvable. The level of weapons they were trying to get were not things that the U.S. is even legally allowed to sell to Saudi Arabia.
Oh, but we're getting around that now because they're sending 3,000 troops to Saudi Arabia. And
hand carry it, okay.
And the Saudis are paying for it. I don't know how they're paying for it. They're doing a check, cash, money order. I haven't heard yet on that, but they're paying for 3,000 troops now. Basically, the U.S. military has become a mercenary force for our world governments, but they're going to pay us for it, Rick.
Well, that may be connected to this blackmail also.
Yes. Right, because there's reports that the Saudis have bought out whole floors, even the whole building of some of the Trump organization's resorts, hotels. So if you look at this, some have argued that if that is related in any form to exchange of influence, let's say President Trump doesn't know anything about it. It's something to do with his sons, their lust, their greed for money. Jared Kushner is involved in this anyway. You now have another angle for an article of impeachment.
Hey, I want to move on to a couple more items before we close. Ukraine. Reuters reporting today, Ukraine plans to fire the prosecutor who led the investigations into the firm where Joe Biden's son served on the board. a central figure in the activity at the heart of the impeachment proceedings against President Trump, a source told Reuters. So Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, has acknowledged meeting the prosecutor. So the Ukrainian prosecutor who has met with Giuliani is being fired.
Now, that's really strange.
The prosecutor confirmed that he was looking into investigating those officials that had worked to fire General Khashoggi.
To me, Edward, would imply that Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, the Jewish president elected last year, yeah, that he's swinging over to the other side.
This has brought too much trouble for him.
Yes.
He's trying to get as far away from it as he can at this point.
Or he's been told, you'll have a better deal waiting for you if you cut the legs out under Giuliani and Trump, because some things in Ukraine, okay? Look, Donald Trump isn't clean.
We know that. And we knew it going in.
And the Clintons and the Bidens aren't clean. I'm not defending one crook against another. They're all slimy. Okay, so Trump's onto something that is hidden in the Ukraine that would bring down the Democrats. So the Democrats are covering up what they were doing by trying to take down Trump for investigating them. So they've made a deal with Zelensky. You get on our side, we're going to get rid of Trump here in the next 60 days. You get on our side, and life's going to be wonderful.
It's twofold. If you look at this, remember the two figures who never get brought up in relation to Paul Manafort. I bring up Paul Manafort because what he eventually went to prison for was not failing to register as a foreign agent working in Ukraine. Remember, it was Ukraine. Right. Well, the other two individuals related to that case was Tony and John Podesta. John Podesta, the chairman of Hillary Clinton's campaign, the man whose emails leaked.
Yes, and were the servers in Ukraine.
Well, we know that Charmella, the CIA, whistleblower, he'd done work with Alexandria Chalupa, who'd worked out of the Ukraine. There has to be something here. There's no way this is just a coincidence. As you noted, is President Trump and Rudy Giuliani and even the Attorney General able to actually investigate this? It doesn't appear to be the case, and it appears on the Ukrainian end, the Ukrainian officials are turning from any agreement or even leeway they'd given Rudy Giuliani and our officials to do so.
And the Ukrainian revolution was orchestrated by the Obama administration with Hillary Clinton.
That's right.
And John McCain. So all of them had their dirty, grubby paws in Ukraine. There's dirt there. It's all over them. Another story, Jerusalem Post. Why is Rudy Giuliani close with this Ukrainian rabbi? Well, Rudy's rabbi turns out to be a Chabad Lubavitcher.
Yes, his name is Moshe Asman. It's number 3 for control. This relationship is coming into specifically the light now because there was a meeting between the two that was arranged by Lev Parnas and Igor Frudim. Now,
the guys that got arrested.
Yeah, the businessmen who tried to take a one-way ticket trip back to Ukraine were arrested and are holding at the moment. If this is tied in now, you have to look at how Chabad, we've said this before, is the role of Chabad internationally to act as the matchmakers, the Chatham House networkers in the country of origin.
It's a mafia organization.
Now, if you understand what's happening between these two camps as a mob fight, a mob war that's going on, it makes a whole lot more sense, doesn't it?
Look, what better way to hide a mafia organization than to be a religious leader?
Or a politician.
No,
or both.
No, but religious leaders, nobody suspects, pastors and priests and rabbis and monks and stuff of being either mafia
or corrupt
or intelligence agents. Okay, because I personally think the Jesuits are, they're a bunch of James Bonds in black robes. All right, it's an global intelligence operation, and they can travel undercover as a religious leader. And I think what Chabad Lubavitch is a mafia operation. It's a Jewish mafia operation, and they've worked their way inside numerous influential nations, the United States, Russia,
South America,
yes,
Brazil.
Everywhere. I am shocked at how fast they're growing. And money is pouring in. I mean, massive amounts of money is pouring into Chabad Lubavitch.
Well, you can't oppose them. They're pretty much invulnerable at this point, because you try to oppose them, you'll be hit. If you're in the country, you'll be accused of anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism.
It's a beautiful setup, really.
Of course.
It really is. I mean, it really is the perfect setup.
George W. Bush had a Chabad Lubavitch rabbi. I mean, you start connecting the dots, and you start seeing how many of these rabbis are close to politicians. And again, they can be on the inside to give influence and to gain information, and nobody suspects them because they're dressed as a religious leader. And it's a very effective mode of operation.
Definitely good cover.
Move on quickly. Out of Turkey, Russia in talks for joint production of S-400s. There's another story. We're back to Erdogan and the United States. Turkey's a NATO ally, a NATO member, and yet they're going to jointly produce the S-400s that would be capable of shooting down NATO warplanes.
Now, the second part of the story is that by going into this talk for joint production, it actually delays the deployment of these S-400 devices in Turkey. And one might argue that this is even a consolation given to the United States, because it gives the United States further time to potentially sweeten the deal for either a U.S. Patriot missile system or a re-inclusion in the F-35 program that the Turkish military has already spent billions of dollars into.
And you also have the Incirlik Air Base.
Yes.
Right.
And the nukes, the American nukes that are at the air base, and that was circulating in the news a couple of weeks ago about possible Turkish blackmail of the United States. See, we go back to Kushner. Just what has Erdogan threatened to do?
Well, look at Erdogan. It's at the base level. This man has lived through a coup. He literally avoided assassination. I think this man is willing to call the bluff of President Trump and a lot of his officials and play these dangerous gambles. But in this case, would he sell out the Trump administration to ensure his survival, not just political but physical? I think he would.
Rick,
go ahead.
In headlines today, we had an unusual story. I want to get your take on it. And it talked about an American B-52 that ran a run through Syria, and then apparently the Russian S-400s that were set up in there had been deactivated.
Yeah, this is really interesting. Debka File, which is Israeli intelligence-connected news site, they ran a story last night that said that the Russian S-400s, which are anti-missile batteries, have been quietly deactivated in Syria. It was a very unusual story. Why would Putin shut them down in Syria right now?
Right.
And Debka actually, they floated the idea that it's a financial issue, that Russia's cutting its military budget. I don't buy that story.
They're out of money. They can't.
Yeah, that's the story.
Plug, run the electricity for the S-400.
Yeah, that's the story that they're giving. Is that, Putin wants to get out of Syria. He's got to cut his costs. But at the same time, there were Russian news reports that an American B-52 nuclear bomber flew over Syrian airspace going toward a Russian air base in Syria.
Kinnaman Air Base in Latakia province in the northwest portion of the country.
Now, that just happened, according to this report. This is a rough English translation of of a Russian news source. It says a few hours ago, over the southern part of Greece, already close to Cyprus, the American strategic bomber B-52 was noticed, which was a rather big surprise due to the approach to the Russian military air base. The exact route of the U.S. strategic bomber remains unknown. According to a number of the information, against bad translation here, The plane flew close to the border of Syria, heading into the airspace of Jordan. I said it entered airspace. This said it flew at the border of Syria. For what purpose the American strategic bomber B-52 appeared next to a Russian military base in Syria so far remains unknown. However, these aircraft were previously seen in imitation of attacks on Russian military bases in the region, in connection with which experts believe that this is another attempt to scare Russia with an American presence.
So you have S-400s deactivated. You have a B-52 bombing run that goes along the Syrian border. Why were the S-400s deactivated?
This Russian newspaper goes on to say it is noteworthy that previously unconfirmed information appeared that the Russian airbase no longer is under the protection of the S-400 air defense systems. The missile defense systems are disabled.
I'm just not buying the story that they're out of money.
I don't either. No, it could be that Putin is playing rope-a-dope. Muhammad Ali is.
He's leaving his guard down.
Well, he would just lay into Muhammad Ali would just lay into the ropes, and he'd make his opponent believe, guys, he's going to pass out. He can't even get up off the ropes, and he would lure his opponent to come over, and once he got close enough, he'd do the knockout punch.
Right. So he'd use the momentum of his opponent as an extra power punch into. That's how he got Frazier.
That's right. So, because his opponent's running over there. Hey, you're going to run right into my fist, you know?
For the kill shot.
So that's one possibility, is that the Russians are playing rope-a-dope.
Now, I've got a theory with this, is that we know that both the United States and Russia, we test each other. We test each other's capabilities. Is it possible that the Russians deactivated their S-300 and S-400 systems to not allow the Israelis and the Americans to do these kind of mock flights, these bomber runs, these fighter plane runs? Because, for example, the technology in the F-35 and F-16, F-22 reportedly has the ability to tell if it's gotten a missile lock on it and these other things. If they're playing a game of not allowing the U.S. to test the S-300, S-400 capabilities, they may have deactivated them. And in addition to doing this, if they're not active and they don't fear the U.S. is going to deploy some kind of death strike to Latakia, the Heinemann Air Base, it may have actually denied the United States an ability to test our military capabilities.
And it's a possibility, too. But remember 2 weeks ago, actually around the 24th of October, the Russian news agencies were reporting that a B-52 did a practice run on bombing Kaliningrad.
Right. By the Baltic. I mean, completely the other side of the world for the Russians, but a enclave the Russians have actually deployed their own nuclear forces to, out of the fear that the U.S. and NATO in general may be attempting to test an invasion of in the future.
And there's also reports that I saw one today that Ukraine ordered the airspace along the Ukrainian Crimea border. They closed down their airspace on the Ukrainian side.
The report was the Ukrainian military, run by Zelensky, reportedly, if we're to go by the core of there isn't a rebellion inside his military, they're running air defense drills. And as part of the air defense drill, they've had to, in their mind, shut down the airspace. The Russians have reportedly complied, as in they're not flying aircraft through the region, but to set up a no-fly zone, as we saw with Libya, the United States. These sometimes are the precursor to escalated military conflict.
You know, President Putin plays it really coy, doesn't he? He really plays it so cool and so coy.
He's a chess champion. And martial arts, the guy is he's a
strategic master.
Yes, a strategic master.
And how do we really know that those S-400s were deactivated along the Syria border?
What if the S-400s were shut down, but the S-500s weren't?
Because we've had reports of American ships and locations, being able to, go dead with Russian aircraft flying over. Maybe the Russians have the ability to mask their signal to be able to say, yeah, we shut down our S-400s, but they're fully active.
That's interesting, because that's an interesting concept. And it could also be a defensive measure that they really were expecting an attack on their Syrian base. And they said, power down and take a
punch.
Not take a punch.
A defensive posture?
A defensive posture that would say, we're not interested in fighting yet.
Right.
Not right now. We just turned everything off. If you bomb us, we're not,
We're not going to return.
We're not.
There's going to be no reciprocal action.
They may have been expecting that there was an attack coming.
Well, we know the Russians.
I tend to think it's a rope-a-dope. It's my personal. I think with us sending B-52s to Kaliningrad and then Syria, look, we're talking about the removal of the President of the United States.
Right.
You don't think the Russians aren't nervous that there's a coup underway in the United States?
Yeah, they're watching. They're saying, we better be really careful. They're likely to provoke a war with us to distract them.
And the people coming after Trump are Russia haters.
Yes.
It's a very dangerous time right now.
And it's a very dangerous game to play, because these warmongers here in the U.S. that love war, they're going to get their full of it one day. They're going to take a big, long drink of it, and there won't be a place to cough it up. They'll have to swallow it all. I mean, it's what we, our whole economy is really built on. We need a war. We're hungry for a war. We're thirsting for a war. And we're going to have one. We know there's one coming.
And Doc, at the center of this power struggle is the money system. Who controls the banks? Who controls the money? Because if you control the money in the banks, you control the world.
Yes.
And the U.S. is tapped out. It's financially broke. We're living on borrowed money, and Russia and China have been quietly building another system.
A gold-backed cryptocurrency system, the Petro yuan being part of this.
Everett, as long as I've been doing this news program, this is 20-some years now. As long as I've been doing this program, I've been reporting year after year after year about Russia and China stockpiling gold.
That's why I don't believe the S-400 money situation.
That's right.
I know they could tap into their resources anytime they wanted to.
Absolutely. But they have been stockpiling gold in preparation for the day the U.S. dollar crashes.
Right.
Okay, so the U.S. knows the elite that rule this country, whatever you want to call this thing, the Committee of 300. I've heard so many different names over 20 years.
Shadow government.
Yeah, whatever you want to call them, all right? These people are desperate to hold on to power. And killing millions of people doesn't mean anything to them. It's about power and money, because whoever wins this next war will rule the world for 100 years.
Right.
I mean, America's been in control for 70 years now, since World War II.
Yeah.
And we're starting to run out of gas. So you got to have another big world war to get another push out there for another 50, 70 years.
And that doesn't mean that our nation ceases to exist, but it won't be the same nation.
That's right.
A whole different configuration, maybe.
That's right.
A whole different population, maybe. And so,
whole different type of government.
I mean, even the Roman Empire went through at least 5 different permutations of the empire. It went from, republic to total control by the Caesars. I mean, to the proletariat. I mean, it went through all the different permutations before it finally fell.
I don't think our constitutional republic will be here in the 2030s. I think there will be a new constitution, a new government. It'll be just what you just described. It'll be a remaking. It'll still say America, right? Russia's still there. It's not the Soviet Union, is it?
Right.
It's the Russian Federation.
Right.
Country's still there. The cities are still there, but it's not the same government.
Right.
You're going to have the same thing here. All right. So in the Russia the Russian Federation, you have a lot of leftovers from the Soviet Union. The next iteration in America, you have leftovers from
the Constitutional Republic.
The current, yes, right. But it'll be a different government, a different constitution, a different style of government, a different form of government. Listen, here's why. I can tell you why. Because our Republican form of government was designed by the Founding Fathers for a moral Christian people, right, to self-govern themselves. They were governed by their Christian morality, not by big government. Because we're no longer a Christian nation, we can't govern ourselves. Right. Look around you. Look at what you're looking at right now. The people can't govern themselves. We're coming apart. And so the country they can't operate much longer under that current constitutional government. And everybody that's trying, all the patriots out there, you're all trying to save the Constitution. Well, look, I think the Constitution is a wonderful thing. But you've got it wrong about how you're going about to do this. If you really want to save the constitutional republic, then you have got to go back and find out what did people believe about God and Jesus Christ and righteousness in 1776. You've got to go back and return to that level of spirituality. Because if you don't do that, you can't save the constitutional republic. Doc, most of the churches, most of the conservative evangelical churches would be considered heretics, yes, in 1776.
Well, the overwhelming majority of them would be today.
Yeah, about 99% of them would be classified as heretics. So if you want to save the constitutional republic, then you better find out
the environment
what they were preaching in 1776.
It'd be like having a body of flesh but no bones. If there's no bones, if there's no structure, it's just a blob of flesh.
And you know what? Back in the 1700s, there was no rapture. There was no state of Israel. There was no Zionism. There was no millennial kingdom. None of these things were preached.
Right.
None of them. These are all inventions of the last 100 years in America.
But a confession of faith, that was essential. Baptism, that was essential. Catechism, that was essential.
And righteous, holy living.
That's right.
So, if you want to save the republic, you got to first go back to old-time Christianity. And without it, everything you do is going to be in vain. But whether it happens or not, it doesn't affect me in the sense that I am committed to the kingdom of God. My citizenship is in the kingdom of God. I've said this many times before. America's not coming back, but Jesus Christ is.
Amen.
The old America that I knew, it's not coming back. I gave up on that years ago. It's not coming back. But Jesus Christ is coming back, and his kingdom is coming. And that's what I long for and hope for. And I encourage you to put your faith and trust in the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Put your hope in him. Forget about politics and all this stuff. That's all waste. You know, Doc, the other day, last week, remember I told you, I was just sitting in my office praying to the Lord about how corrupt our government is and what I have to deal with every day to come out here and do this. And the Lord he just gave me the scripture, don't fret about evildoers. They're going to disappear one day.
Right.
They're here one day like grass and they're gone. Don't fret about evildoers. These people are evil. They're evildoers. And there have been many times in the history of mankind that the world has been more evil than it is right now. We've not seen barbaric behavior, Doc,
yet,
compared to what other generations have seen.
Cannibalism,
yes,
mass rape in cities.
That's right. True barbaric behavior. We haven't reached that stage yet.
But we're
moving
down the track.
We're moving in that direction. You need to be hidden in Christ.
Amen.
You got to be in the secret place of the Most High. Be hidden in Christ. That's the place to be. Thank you so much for watching True News today. Hey, we are still banned by YouTube, and I don't know how to get the word out to the YouTubers that don't know how to find anything outside of YouTube. You know, that's their problem, you know. We're still here every day, TruNews.com and all the other platforms that we use. So if you know any of them, tell them life exists outside of YouTube. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back here tomorrow.
God bless you.
The place. It's not stuck in Jerusalem. It's going to Jakarta. It's going to Hong Kong. It's going to Davos, Switzerland. It's going to Shanghai. It's going to Mexico City. This temple's on the move. We're the temple.